Welcome to the Spinning Our Gears podcast. As a reminder, the issues, views, and opinions discussed on the podcast are those of the hosts and their guests and do not reflect that of any department, agency, city, municipality, state, or country. All characters and individuals discussed on the podcast should be considered fictional for entertainment value. Blue Falcons, don't go getting it twisted. This show is rated explicit and listener discretion is advised. If you aren't cool with that, hit the X and find something else. We are on all major podcast and social media platforms. The best way to get a hold of us is www.spinningourgears.com. Without any further fanfare or ado, here are your hosts, Turk, Swagger, Erica, Kenyon, and this is the Spinning Our Gears podcast. We're here.
We have made it.
We have arrived.
Yes.
Well, I want to welcome everyone to the Spinning Our Gears podcast and a very special episode today. Today, we have Mr. Fabulous, Dr. Dave, and Mark the Cop from the Shield Within podcast because we have a great topic to talk about today. How are you guys doing?
And you missed his rank before he reaches through and kicks your ass. It's Captain Fabulous.
Captain.
It's not Captain Chaos, but it could be later on. So,
Did I say Mr.? I said Mr., didn't I?
Yes.
Oh.
That's your stripper name, Turk.
It is.
Well, it was good talking to you guys.
M.R. Dot. Yes.
Well, so are you going to be Captain Chaos or Professor Chaos?
Well, we'll see how the episode goes. We'll spin that off into another episode. Yes, that's why I said that.
Perfect.
Yes.
It all comes around.
Yeah, that's why I said that, yes.
So, I guess I didn't really think of an intro today because I was kind of flying off the cuff, but
That's the best way to do a podcast is you get the spontaneity. You know, some of these shows I watch are that you can tell they're really scripted. Mm-hmm. And that's one thing I like about your show and our show is that we're not scripted, but we're totally improv or spontaneous.
I think spontaneous.
Yeah, yes. And I do, this episode I'm really excited about doing. Turk, you and I spoke, I don't know, about a month ago, and this kind of occurred organically out of a conversation. We both interviewed the same person, Erica, with Windmill Wellness, and now it's Warrior Wellness.
Yeah.
And I always butcher her last name. And do you know how to say it, Turk?
She never actually told us when we interviewed her, so I don't know.
But Erica, shout out to you. I'm not gonna butcher your name. I'll look you up here in a minute, and we'll say it in a little bit. But Erica is a therapist. She's a former police officer. Had it all, lost it all. Literally lost it all, and then reinvented herself, and now she's a very successful therapist down in Texas, and I just have mad respect for that woman. But while we were interviewing her, David had made the comment about his work, how many years you been doing the job? 44?
At this point, it's 50.
50 years.
Ooh.
Wow. That deserves a round of applause.
Thank you.
Yeah, 50 years. So I was 7 years old when he started doing work. But anyway.
I was only 4, so,
You were not,
Jordan,
my client at that point.
At 8 he was,
That's
right?
right.
Yes.
Turk was just a gleam in his daddy's eye. So, but anyway, David had shared about his work when he worked with foster children. And then I'll just go ahead and let you take it there, Turk.
Yeah, it sparked an interest in my mind and kind of struck home a little bit for some personal reasons. But when he made the comment that he did about the connection between law enforcement and foster children, I immediately thought that would be a great episode. I really wanted to pick his brain on a lot of different things, and I guess I'm kind of glad that you guys didn't go down that rabbit hole with her, so we had this opportunity to do an episode together.
Right. Yes, exactly.
So, also, side note, we're thinking this is probably going to air in what, February?
Ish.
Yeah.
March-ish.
There's going to be some big news with Erica by that time that I think you guys are all going to like quite a bit.
Is this something we've talked about before?
It's something we've talked about, yeah.
Fantastic.
Yep. There's going to be a lot of
We'll talk off air.
Well, there's just going to be a lot of big things happening on our side of things between now and February, so
That's fantastic, bro.
very excited about that.
Good.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I guess I kind of thought the format for today would kind of a free flow format, and we would talk about, with Mark the Cop and Captain Fabulous and I would talk about our experiences. What's that?
It's Erica Umberhagen.
I never would have got that right.
And if I butchered it, Erica, I'm so sorry.
I guess I figured we could talk about our experiences as beat cops dealing with foster care and with the DHS system. Then we can kind of pick Dr. Dave's brain on his side of things,
Oh my God.
and then we can
don't
kind of
have that
bring it all
much time.
together with our own personal experiences.
Sounds good. Sounds real good.
So, the first question I had was, Mark, do you remember the first time working the street that you had to deal with the foster system or DHS?
Oh gosh, yes. Yeah, we had we had a house on South 7th Street. Say that 3 times real quick. And this house was nothing but foster children, and they would run away. And here in Ohio at that time, none of these kids had identifications. And Senator Beagle, who was a great friend and a great friend of law enforcement, he served on some committee for the children, and I think since then there's been a law here in Ohio to where these kids get photo IDs. It's like, it's free. If they're welds of the state, why don't we have identification for these children? So, the poor foster parents, they didn't have any pictures of these kids, and these kids would say, fuck it, and walk off. And, we were dealing with them constantly, and some of the officers just really had no empathy for these poor kids. And I have to sadly admit that there was times I had very little empathy for them. But, once I started understanding where they were coming from, they're in a strange home, they're in a strange town, they just want to go be with people that make them comfortable.
Right.
They don't know who these people are. And I think it's so admirable of people that open their home to foster children to try and give these kids a better life. And, some of the times I reflect on the stories that Dr. David shares with us. And the one story in particular where you were talking about the kids leave the home and they get put into foster care and they're trying to work with the parents, and the parents are fucked up, for whatever reason. And the kids are like, yeah, when we go back, we know we're fucked. That's the thing that really sticks in my head. And I'm thinking, wow, how can this be good? How can this be conducive for raising a child? How much trauma are you imprinting on that brain? And I can remember, things from my childhood and through reading Create Your Own Life, Travis Howell's book. And he shared in his book about when he got ran over by a golf cart. Have you read that, Turk? Have you read Travis Howell's book?
I have not.
Shame on you. Anyway, pick it up. It's well worth it. It's a great read. He was talking about, he got ran over by a golf cart. Of course, they're out west, wherever they're at. And he was very young, and he remembered the temperature, he remembered the smells, he remembered what he was wearing, he remembered what the woman said when they pulled him out from underneath the car. He was just right down to just graphic detail. And how he related that is that's how trauma imprints those events on your brain. And that's, he was switching that in there, and I was thinking, wow, I can remember being 3 years old, and I have abandonment issues from my childhood. And I can remember being in the house alone, just terrified. Well, my mother was outside hanging up laundry. That's when we used to hang out clothes, so throw them in the dryer. Mm-hmm. But, that was just one incident. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't in any danger. I just remember being that scared, running through the house, screaming for my mother. Mm-hmm. I can only just imagine what some of these poor kids go through in that life. So go ahead, Turk.
Yeah, I piggyback off of that. Remembering my very first one, I remember walking away wondering how much trauma we as law enforcement put on them in that situation.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes.
Good one.
My first...
Was you a dick?
No, not at all. But... I mean, I very well could have been. The issue was that we got called to a welfare check, and I believe it was for maybe a 16-year-old female. And what we quickly learned as we got on scene was that this house was, much like you were describing, it was one that was filled with children from foster. Mm-hmm. And I want to say that it was broke down like maybe 4 or 5 had been adopted from foster, and there were 2 or 3 that were in the foster system kind of staying there. Mm-hmm. But it was very, very awkward because the dad answered the door, and on the first floor you have the living room. The mom was sitting on the couch in the complete dark. Mm-hmm. And later learned that she had some mental health issues that were kind of contributing to the issues with the family. But basically she just pointed up the stairs and said, "She's up there." And the dad walked us up there to her, to where the 16-year-old was at, and she wouldn't give us anything. It was me and my partner, and she would not give us anything. And eventually we realized that we had to separate the dad and the mom from the situation before she would give us anything. But even there, it wasn't a lot. She really just covered her bases and said she wasn't suicidal so that we didn't have to take her to the hospital.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because she didn't want to do that shit, did she?
Right. But I walked away wondering, was the reason she wasn't talking because of the parents? Was it because of us? Was it maybe law enforcement had taken her out of the house that she'd been in?
Right. Mm-hmm. Right.
What got her to the point where she was either that scared or that standoffish that she wouldn't even open up to us?
Right.
And that was kind of my takeaway, realizing that you have to wear a different set of gloves, not even kid gloves, but a different set of gloves altogether if you're going to be handling and dealing adopted and foster care kids.
Right. That's very typical of my experience with this intersection of this population with law enforcement. Sometimes the kids would see, like Kelly has talked about on her show, the foster kids, the kids that became foster kids would see the police people, EMTs, whatever, as saviors. Like when they would walk in, the danger would go down, the chaos would stop, and life would start to make sense a little bit. So there are some circumstances, I can remember a girl I knew, she was probably 13, and man, when the cop would happen to be on grounds for whatever reason, she immediately would go talk to that cop. That was like that cop represented to her safety. I could go to him and I could feel safe. That's how cops were on other cases, like you're saying, Turk. Cops were the ones who came in and had to bust fights up, had to get aggressive, had to put people in handcuffs, had to become forceful in their words and in their decisions. And a lot of those kids had never seen anything like that before. And it became really scary. And it became part of the trauma. I remember the time when, and then I would get the story about mom and dad's fight, and then the cops coming in the front door and being loud and, trying to take over the scene and so forth, and it became part of the trauma. And so that absolutely is a part of it. And when you never know, man, it's like every other thing y'all do on the street.
Right.
You don't know what the fuck you're walking up to. Right. You don't know what they've been through, what they just went through 5 minutes ago, 5 years ago, etc. So, same thing here. You walk up on a foster kid who's run away. My God, I had dozens of foster kids run away. It almost became an expected thing. and almost at little ages. I mean, I had the first kid I ever had die in my care was in a foster home. Wow. And he ran away to see his mom and dad. And he was crossing, there's a little town north of here that has a really beautiful city park. It's very large, has a little river running through it. And he was walking across the aqueduct across the river, and he fell and he drowned. He was 8. And this was the 4th or 5th time he had run away. He got put into foster care at 6. He had lived in 3 or 4 by the time he was 8. And he just wanted to go home. That's it. So cops for him were somebody to run from. They were going to take him back to the foster system. No, did not want that. So it varied from, oh my God, safety's here, to run for the hills. You just never knew.
You know, 2 things I want to cover with that would be the first part being we talked about how the foster home environment has to be that nurturing and loving one. Because from my personal experience away from law enforcement, I know that there are a lot out there that are looking for that state check.
Absolutely.
They're looking to fill the house. Yeah. And they're not providing that nurturing environment. And that's a big reason why kids don't want to be there.
Yes.
The other thing that I kind of wanted to cover, just based on what you said, was I wonder how much of it becomes or is a generational thing. When you have adults telling them law enforcement is not good people, and then law enforcement comes in and takes them away, how much does that perpetuate itself?
Makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, if somebody tells you one thing and then it turns out to be true right in front of your eyeballs, with a lot of volume to the whole thing, yeah, you walk away with a very strong conclusion about how law enforcement is. And it sometimes can't ever go away. It can't change to something more reasonable, something more reality-based. That is a part of it. And like it or not, it is a part of it. And, you know, I'm thinking of kids who, I'm thinking more now of probation officers. They have totally not wanted to do anything to do with the cops. So they end up on probation in a foster home with a probation officer. And sometimes, I've got nice memories rolling through my head right now, probation officers who've been able to soften that negative conclusion about law enforcement.
Oh, cool.
POs have a different frame of reference, a different way of being, different backgrounds, training, and all that stuff. And so they would approach a kid in a whole different way than the cop would. And in Troy, we had a juvenile aid officer when I first got into the area, and he was here for probably 10, 15 years after I got here. And he was just like, he was a big man, but all the kids loved him. I mean, he was just like, nobody could fuck with him. He was just like, he was unfuckable. The kids would just, you know, they tried giving him shit, tried to get a rise out of him. Just it was not going to happen. And that became something. Well, you're not like the other cops I've known. That's right. We're not all like the same person. You
Damn
know?
right.
So, yeah, there's a whole lot of variation in how that can change. But so often, man, if your mom and dad, your best friends, your neighbors, are up and down the street is all getting shouted out, you know, by the cops. Yeah, and then they bust into your house making noise and threatening, menacing, aggressive. Yeah, your conclusions are drawn. Very much so at that point.
Well, and if you think about it, too, the officers getting sent to these calls, the child removals, the child welfare checks, the runaways, it's the new guys, because the old guys don't want to go handle it. Even though the old guys probably have more compassion and have more experience, it's the new guys who would rather be going and busting crime. So they're getting on scene trying to wrap things up as quick as they can, and they're using that robot voice and that robot mentality. And that's why the PO is different than the other cops those kids have noticed.
That's a great.
It's a great point, man. It's a really good point. Yeah.
Captain, Mr. Dr. Chaos, Fabulous.
I love that title. Can I put it on a business card?
Major.
What was your first experience like in dealing with foster?
You know, thinking back on multiple calls, and a lot of it was already touched on by you and Dr. Dave, is it's a space issue. So when you have multiple children in a foster care system, is they don't have their own space to go to, so they're sharing rooms with 3 or 4, involved, and the only thing that they have is clinging on to a blanket, teddy bear, something like that of ownership with that. And it's that type of stuff because you're a cog in the system, and it's just trying to call someplace mine, and then sitting at the table and trying to fend for yourself, and then getting that space away. It's like what Dr. Dave said, is that one child that was running away with that is wanting to have their own space, and I think that was how they were trying to get out and call something that their own. And that's just kind of what I was subject to multiple times, is then you're taking that child who did run away from a home or something, and then you're grabbing them, and then you're placing them back in that environment that they don't want to be in, and they're more so traumatized on top of that. So it's that recycling, unfortunately, circumstances for that child, and what that child knows is he's been placed in this home, and then later on, years go by, and then because of disruption and being in that non-caring environment, well, we're going to place you in another home, hopefully it's going to be better for you, and then going through that cycle again. So hopefully, as that person grows, is that cycle is broken to where they can find a good family that will be nurturing and caring for them, and giving them their own space, listening to them, and helping them through their life of being something that this is a normal way of what we know of parenting, compared to where you was in that unfortunate situation to where you can adapt to 4 or 5 other children that you had no relationship with prior to, or trying to bond as a brother or sister or something like that. You're just somebody there in that living environment. So it's...
And that's kind of a perfect segue, I guess. Dr. Dave would know more about this. I know that in Iowa it's not this way. Are there any regulations in Ohio where a person going into foster care maybe has to go to a therapist, or has to check in with someone, or has to be evaluated?
Pretty much it's across the board. It's pretty much assumed that there needs to be somebody from the mental health field following that kid through foster care. And, the way things are in reality, that sounds really good, and it's a wonderful goal to put on a piece of paper and talk with a kid about. You're going to get counseling. But the truth is, the community mental health centers in our area have very few clinicians left. And so you can tell a kid, well, we're going to have you see somebody at the mental health center because that costs us the least money. And there's nobody at the mental health center to see any of the children because their caseloads are already booked up with adults and chronically mentally ill people, which are mostly what goes to community mental health centers anymore. So private practitioners are few and far between that will be willing to take a children's services case and work with that kid, because they're not going to get paid as much. And the cases are complicated. You might end up having to go to court. You might have to meet with the foster parents. You might have to meet with the biological parents. You might have to meet with the next set of foster parents. You might have to meet with the probation officer. You might have to go to the school and meet with the teachers, because this kid is like, what the hell is going on with this guy? So you end up getting involved with half a dozen systems from one case.
Good Lord.
It's easy, common, and it makes sense when you add it all up. The kids, like Mark said, you've got a kid in a strange home, strange city, strange school, strange kids, strange neighborhood. Yeah, having one guy, one lady that's sitting in an office being a constant, kind of sweet, sounds really good. Maybe help me make sense out of this shit. But that's hard to find. And so we can have the goals, and I think they're good goals. I think it's just like common sense to have somebody from the mental health field involved with these kids as they go through the system. But the resources are getting thinner and thinner for that to happen.
Wow.
And you kept saying the word might. However, what I will say is that it's most likely.
Yeah.
Even if you have a very clean-cut case of removal to either reunification or adoption,
Right.
You have no idea how many court cases are going to be there, how many checkups are going to be there with the DHS side of things. There, tens to hundreds are going to occur, even if it all gets wrapped up in 6 months.
Yes.
Now, on our side of things, I don't know. I know for the little kids, there was no counseling involved.
Okay.
I don't know about older kids. I know that Iowa has a lot of really good resources out there for mental health, but there is nothing in place that says we remove this child, they need to go see a therapist. which I think is a huge disservice to the children in the state.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a big hole in the service array if you're not supplying that resource. Yeah, I agree. And it's really cool that we do it on paper.
Right.
It's also not cool that we can't do it in reality. And I think it's really unfortunate in Iowa that that's not just a kind of a given. You got somebody in this situation. To me, it's like, guys, if you pick somebody up on the street who's, I'm thinking another situation recently. A gentleman, mid-20s, checked into a psych ward, walks out in his hospital skivvies, that kind of thing with the with the highly ventilated clothing.
Yeah.
And he's walking around downtown, one of our little towns around here. And he gets picked up, and it's like, bet this guy needs some mental health help.
You think?
And
The grippy socks are a dead giveaway.
It was true in this case as well. And yet you'd think a 4-year-old who's just been ripped out of mom and dad's house, mom and dad have just gone through A, B, and C, and now that 4-year-old might need somebody to spend some time with,
Yeah.
work some shit out.
Yeah.
Let's let a 12-year-old be a 12-year-old because he worked it out at 4. The 4-year-old shit gets worked out at 4. It's a lot easier being 10. So it just makes sense, long-term, short-term, to provide that service, and for the state to say, nah, we don't really need that one. Nah, that costs money.
Right. And that's what it comes down to, is that costs money.
Exactly. It all gets down to that. And kind of where I was keying off what you're both talking about, just how much the mental health services is stressed, and where my mind is going is like, well, how do we free that up? How do we get more therapists doing therapy? I remember in our interview with Erica and Shannon, they were talking about, you have to want to do this.
Yes.
And how much time they put in to become therapists is like, 8-9 years
Right.
to just start it. And I'm thinking something's horribly wrong with that process. How could this be streamlined? Could you have X amount, like 4 years worth of schooling, and then start a mentorship, or you immediately start getting into it? Or like what Dr. David does, and I distinctly remember our conversation 4 years ago now, or 5 years ago, you're like, nah, I'm not getting my licenses back. I wrote the book. I did it. I wrote the tests. Fuck it. I'm just going to be a coach. And, so everyone gets the benefit of your 50 years experience, but, you don't have the checkbox there that you've done that. And you're like, why the hell am I going to go work for someone? Or don't you have to be observed?
Right.
Or some shit like that
For a long time, yeah.
But it just seems like that whole system is so horribly antiquated. That was fine for 30, 40 years ago, but today, how do we get more therapists to the system? How do we get more people, with boots on the deck? And then right back to the foster system, I know here in Ohio, our former Governor Strickland just gutted our mental health services. He shut down facilities all over the state. I know that a lot of the group homes for the kids all got shut down. And it's just like, what are you people thinking? Why? Why wouldn't this kid have his own bed, have his own space? Even though it's in a group home, it's not the best in the world, but, tag on, going back to this horrible home life where the parents are strung out on drugs and could give two fucks. We went to Kevin Hines's lecture. He's the gentleman that jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge, survived. What's his book there, Captain Fabulous? The Art of Being Broken, or something like that?
That is correct.
Is that the name of it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wrote a wonderful book, but he was talking about him and his brother, and his parents were hippies, and they were out doing what they did, and him and his brother were left in a room all day by themselves as infants. And, what would be better, that environment or having them somewhere where they can at least be taken care of? They would have 3 meals a day, a warm bed to sleep in, some type of structure in their life. And that's where I think that, I don't think there's any easy answers in any of this.
Right.
But I know that defunding it, shutting everything down was not the answer. So who's left? Who's your last resource? Now our boys in blue.
Yeah.
You call the police. They'll figure it out.
To be the
So
bad
now,
guys.
yeah, their biggest thing is, let's defund them now.
Right. Yes.
That was a great idea, now wasn't it? You know, the last thing, and then they're like, well, we want to send social workers out with them, which I'm all about that. Why not? You've defunded the fuck out of it, so because the social workers aren't there because they defunded them. Now they want to defund the police. I mean, it's like where is this all going to break down at? And who's suffering? The people are suffering. These
Everyone.
kids are suffering. Everyone suffers. Everyone is losing right now. It just breaks my heart to see where we've come to. It's like, how did we get here?
And these kids, they're kind of like ping pongs because they go through a system. They're at a house. They try to grab attention. So the police come. Then they commit some crime. Then they go to juvenile system. Then they go through that system. Then they're back out. Then they end up in jail again. Or they go to the hospital. So it's this reoccurring cycle, back and forth, back and forth. Then as they grow older with that, then if they become an adult, then they go back through the systems again, through adult courts and jails and everything. Then they become homeless. So we're back and forth with all this and living with those dysfunctions with that. And they're dealing with society all the time and dealing with these past traumas and trying to make it better. And some of them want to make it better, some of them don't. So it's tough to get the proper help when you have no money and no resources to get to, or if the state wants to provide those resources, they tell you to stand in line because there's many in front of you, unfortunately.
We just lost, there were 3 buildings amongst 2 counties where, and the premise of it was screwed up from the beginning, but these buildings were basically kind of a safe haven for kids short term. So either they weren't getting along at home, they needed somewhere to stay the night, or there was a situation where they were in between home and foster. But then also what we were seeing was they would get kids that would go out and commit a crime, and juvenile detention wouldn't take them, so they would house these kids there as well.
Right.
Obviously, that's not a good combination, but we lost all 3 of those buildings now amongst the 2 counties, and so now we have nowhere besides juvenile detention to take them.
Is that due to Turk? Is that due to budget cuts?
Yes.
Or how did you lose the buildings?
The budgeting for the buildings was totally cut.
Nice.
It wasn't
what?
It wasn't even like the governing agency over them had their budget cut. It was, we're just eliminating these altogether.
But who thought that was a good idea?
Who knows? I think it would have come because they were multi-county. I think it would have come from the state level.
Okay, so your state cut the funding to it in lieu of some other giveaway program.
Yeah.
So,
which again, I think on our side of things, we were abusing it because we were mixing in kids who needed a safe place to stay and then kids who'd committed crimes.
Okay. So there was no segregation then. So it's like the good kids aren't over here and then the punk kids are on this side. They were just throwing them all into one big mess. So it sounds to me like an administrative nightmare, where you're putting some 8-year-old kid in with a bunch of 11 and 12-year-olds.
Yep.
What could go wrong there?
And there were several times where I would go to a house and the parent would ask, can you take them somewhere for the night? Yes, and I would say the only option I have is this building. And the problem with that is it's not a secure building. They're going to go in there. They can walk away if they want to. The other agency where that building is at is going to have to take a missing person report. And they're also going to be mixed in with some of these kids who should be in juvenile detention but are instead there.
Right.
So,
wow.
Yeah.
Frying pan to the fire there. That just sounds like no good way. But
to the floor after that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So let's talk about something positive.
Let's do it.
So, Turk, let's you ready to tell the world your story?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I guess actually, I do want to ask one question from you guys before we jump into that, and maybe you don't know the answer. Do you know what it takes in Ohio to become a foster parent?
Dr. David?
No, not exactly. There are steps that have to be gone through. I do know one couple that went through this process, decided not to do it, and there was, there were formal classes in parenting. There was an evaluation by a psychologist. There was interviewing with the caseworker that was going to be over the foster care kind of pod that they were going to be a part of. I think they had to do some job shadowing with another foster parent. Those are the things I remember, Turk.
Okay.
I
So
don't
over
know
here-
what- yeah, go, please.
Oh no, over here it's a little bit more simple, I guess. It is a 10-week class where it's a 1 day a week, 3 hours during that day that you have to go to, and it's kind of the same parenting class that you talked about,
Right.
but the composition of the class is kind of a mixed bag.
Okay.
In Iowa, the foster system is their policy or their motto is reunification,
Yeah.
to
right.
the point where they will look for blood relatives all over the country before they will
Absolutely.
adopt
Yes.
out.
Yeah, yeah,
I understand that. I think there are some benefits to that.
right,
But at the same time, when you have so many kids who need adopted and need families,
right.
and you're looking for some cousin that they've never met before, they have no connection with,
Yeah.
I do have some objection to it as well.
Right.
But so sitting in this class, obviously you have to have that time commitment to it. But you've got people in there who are looking to adopt, and then you've got family members who were forced to go to the class because
Oh,
brother, sister, mother lost
Right.
their kid, and the kid is now being housed in their home.
Right.
So the level of commitment there and the level of effort is definitely all over the board.
Yes.
So
Yeah, and honestly, within this, if you isolated one of those groups, just the foster parents themselves, you'd see all over the board. There are some people in it for the money, and there are some people in it for the service. And you can pretty much spend about 15 minutes, because I used to teach some of those classes. I could tell within minutes which ones are in it for which. There were some people in it for money, and I swear they all smelled the same, man. It's just like, I could just go through the class and go, okay, let's make sure at the end of it, here's the caseworker. That couple over there, they're going to pass everything. They're going to get their whatever it is they need. Don't place any children with them unless you're desperate.
right.
Because they're in it for the check you're going to write them. They're in it for what it does for them, not for what they're going to do for the children.
Right.
Wow.
And Dr. Dave, there's a mutual friend that Mark and I have that this couple's very loving, caring. They've been foster parents for a while. They fostered 2 children and from a large city for almost 2 years, back and forth. They were going through the process of trying to adopt these 2 children. They came from a very underloved family financially and also nurturing with that. They were younger kids when they came to these parents, as I call them. That's what they knew, and they were given to the love and nurture of these 2 individuals, and then their siblings, and then their moms and dads and grandparents. With that, they were part of the family for almost 2 years. But during that 2-year process that they were filing paperwork with the county, the state, of trying to adopt, they ran into multiple hurdles as they were trying to do this process for that. So they became victims of the process with this, and they kind of left with a sour taste in their mouth during this process. Is they had to take multiple trips back to a major city so their biological mom can visit with them. Bio mom, as they refer to her, would go to court with this, plead in front of the judge that I'm trying to get my life back together. Meanwhile, baby's mama, daddy, and all this is in and out of jail with this. The kids of her biological mom, they would have to play underneath supervision with why she was there and with the other parents. So when the kids got done with their 2-hour supervision visit, they get back in the car and go back to the home that they love and know. They celebrated birthdays. They celebrated Christmas. Every holiday together, went to all these different places with this as one of their own with that. And the downtime was I got to go back to BioMom. I got to be with her because of the court orders and to do all this process. As BioMom pleaded with the judge, trying to get her life back together and stuff like that, unfortunately, the loving, caring, nurturing family, they lost those 2 kids back to the court system, and they're back with BioMom and don't know where they're at or any other follow-up with this. But during this whole process of that 2-year, BioMom and the relation that BioMom had with her other mutual friends, they're from the large city, the adopted family, they would get threats of having the kids being taken away from them. They shouldn't have them. They shouldn't be teaching their ways of faith and friendship with this and subject to this. So they've really had some hard times through that. So during those 2 years after the loss of those 2 children, they hit them pretty hard with this. They sat back for a while. They said, we're not going to go through this process again because the emotional roller coaster.
Oh my God!
And then all of a sudden, 3-4 months later, they said, we're going to do this again. So they went back through the paperwork process with this. So they're working now with a local county to process again with this, and hopefully this time will work. So with that, but any child that they can open their heart to and then bring to their family with this is going to be much better for that 1 or 2 children with that. So it's just, God bless them for what they do with this, for their commitment to life and trying to help the young children out with this, because that terrible experience just could have stopped 2 wonderful, loving young families with that to develop their own family.
Wow.
Striking a lot of chords.
Yeah, I thought so there, yes. So I'll kick it back to you on that story, yes.
So I guess first and foremost, before I jump into my story, what I will say is that I'll give some details, but because I made the decision to do a podcast, not my family, so it's going to be a little bit generic, right?
No, that's fine.
We decided that. So we decided that we were going to adopt, and we did our first adoption privately, which was hella expensive. If you guys don't know that route. We
well worth it. Well worth it.
Well worth it, absolutely.
Absolutely.
But when we decided that we were going to adopt again, we realized that we just could not afford it. It wasn't going to happen.
Right.
So my wife, being the amazing person that she is, who has, I think, her entire life wanted to get into the fostering and adopting side of things, did some research, and we jumped in full force. We started taking the classes, and I kind of talked about before how it's a hodgepodge of people. As soon as they find out that you're a cop in the class, it's like all bets are off. Yeah.
It's on. That's true of anything. It doesn't matter what class it is. Good Lord.
Our second or third class, and our classes were downtown ghetto, right? Our second or third class, we went out to the parking lot for a break. All the prospective parents did, and a fight breaks out amongst a bunch of kids off to the side. And
oh wow!
Me being young and dumb, I yell out, "Police stop!" Right? This wasn't my jurisdiction. I don't know what I'm thinking.
Please stop.
Yeah,
please stop or police.
I wish I would have said please stop. One of the kids pulled out a can of pepper spray and doused everyone, and so I had to sit through class. The last hour and a half of class just burning. Oh God, yeah, it was terrible. But we went through the class, and we were able to kind of set some parameters when it came to bringing in kids. We said, obviously you can't give us a ton of details, but we would like to know the parents' names so that I can cross-reference it and make sure that I had not dealt with the parents, because we knew that our end goal was adoption.
Right.
So we get the phone call, and they give us the names. I checked the names out, hadn't dealt with them at all. We bring in the kids, and it turns out they'd given us the wrong last name. And it turned out that not only had I dealt with the mom, the person in charge of removing the kids from the household was someone that I trained with every 2 weeks.
Oh wow! Wow.
So there was a
Close
lot.
to the fire.
Yeah. It was a very tumultuous time, kind of going through that process. And
Well, who fucked that up? First of all,
DHS.
okay.
Yep. And we can talk about DHS in part 2. There's a lot there, but
Oh, I'm sure.
ironically, you guys know I was a canine officer at the time, so I have a lot more liability on my shoulders than anybody else. And halfway through accepting these 2 children and adopting them, I end up going out with the dad in the middle of the night, having no idea. That was interesting, and kind of having to sidestep that and pass it off on someone else. But just kind of going through all of it, we had the kids, and it turned out there were some medical issues we had to deal with, and my wife stepped up 100%. She took care of these kids from the day they came into our house.
Awesome.
That's
Sorry.
all right. Take a minute.
Yeah.
It's okay.
That's okay.
It had to be beautiful to watch, bro.
I'm tearing up too because I'm having a lot of reflection too during our process too. So I'm right there with you, Turk. So yes.
What a wonderful, nurturing woman.
Yeah.
Just
Who somehow happens to end up sleeping next to you on occasion.
right.
And that's an amazing thing that you get to watch her be loving to those kids who were complete strangers when they walked in the door. It had to humble you. It had to make you feel incredibly blessed to have that woman in your life.
Just seeing the fear in my youngest eyes,
Yeah.
it's a tough thing to reflect on, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
There were a lot of ups and downs throughout it, though.
Yes.
At first, the parents thought they wanted to be a part of the kids' lives, and were failing miserably in everything they were doing, including the supervised visits. DHS was able to contact family out of state who initially thought they were going to get involved and then decided they were not. We went through the termination of rights for the parents in court, and the dad, who I dealt with on the street, had the balls to show up high and
Oh
then
my God.
try to shake my hand at the end of the hearing for taking on his children. From there, it was a pretty smooth sailing process, though. Once the rights were terminated, because we'd already been through an adoption before, we kind of knew the process, and it was pretty quick after that. We got everything lined up, and then my wife, just thinking, forward thinking, she actually invited a bunch of people to the courthouse for the adoption, and we had an incredible turnout of friends that I hadn't talked to in a long time. We had an incredible turnout of officers from other agencies who'd been involved throughout the process. But it was a very, very beautiful thing. So
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I gotta say, I just mad respect for you, bro. Mad respect to open your heart, open your home, and then be able to take on that challenge with those kids. You know that they're very blessed to have that, and then that's just an amazing story.
well, thank you.
And and for what you went through and for what I went through is completely different. And we went international adoption.
Okay.
So the reason why we did that is because of what your experience and what you just said with that is kind of like dealing with that on our side. So
Yeah.
my wife is also in law enforcement with that, and what we just talked about for the last 15 minutes was dealing with the system
Yeah.
with that, and that was tough. And our choosing to do international was we didn't want to go through the other couple I just talked about, a 2-year process with that, losing somebody that we care about. So we we felt in our hearts, and I think God led us in a direction to do the international route with that. So we adopted from China with that, and it was a long 9-month process through that. So many hoops to jump through that you and I can talk about. I mean, that can be episode 3 and 4. For it. So
5, 6, 7, and 8.
Yes, it is.
Did you have to do the? Did you have to do the fly over there, meet them, go back, fly back twice?
Unfortunately, no. It was one and done. So it was a 14-day trip with that. But just getting to that point back and forth, in an agency that we worked with out of Texas, with that we traveled over with 13 other couples. With that, we all met in Chicago, then went out. We went as a group with it, but just the local process of going through the classes, going through Catholic Social Services, having the local fire marshal come to our house and do a safety inspection.
Yeah.
With that, do we have fire extinguishers? Do we have this and this? But on the other side is, okay, the next door neighbor has 5 kids, and you haven't been over there and inspected and stuff like that. So and then we had to have papers on top of papers to be notarized. I had to, have local notary. Then I had to drive to the big city to have the notary on top of the notary, and it's all this back and forth stuff. It was very time consuming on some stuff. Some stuff we wonder why we did and why it was done in the process. But you went through the process to do this and through legal for it. So it was a great adventure, very good memories with that, and it was a 9-month process for us. And I'll never forget the day that a UPS delivery guy showed up at our house, and he had the envelope, so we were expecting that. And my wife said, "Well, you probably never delivered a baby before." And he goes, "Excuse me." So with that, so that was our final paperwork on what we had and everything else. So and then everything else took off from there. So there was parts of the system that was broken, but you go through it with that. So it was a neat process up to that point. So with that, but I commend you for what you did here within your state and what you're dealing with and back and forth. But it's nice to have your wife and my wife being that nurturing people and stuff and loving with that. And our daughter has not looked back, for where she was at and what she is, and then subject to that and dealing with Uncle Mark the cop and with that and other stuff. So and he's watched her grown up, and she'll be 19 next week. So with that, so
wonderful.
We're blessed with that and seeing that process of those kids and how they develop and especially within your family too with that. And my wife wants to do it again, so it's like, oh, okay, hey, with that, if we could and everything else to do that, it's great. So what a great experience. And tell me about your other two that you.
So the first one was a private adoption, and we went through that route, Catholic Family Services, or maybe it was Lutheran Family Services, either way.
Okay.
We submitted our family book.
The same as Catholic, just without all the kneeling.
Just different agency in Iowa, yeah.
Yeah, right.
I know, I'm fucking around.
We submitted our family book to them, and then it was a big waiting period, and just wait. And I happened to be in the city that company was centered out of at training.
Okay.
And I got a call about lunchtime and said, "Hey, would you and your wife like to come meet this mother?" Absolutely would. So my wife drove down to meet me in this city. It was like a 2-hour drive. And we found out that mom was like 9 months and 2 weeks pregnant, making the decision. So we literally stayed in that city for 3 days waiting for her to give birth. And that was the private adoption. That one, she knew she was turning over her child. There was no hiccups with that at all. Streamlined 6-7 month process. We then decided to do the foster route, and we got a sibling placement. So our next two were brother sister coming to us, and ironically the age breakdown is 6, 7, and 8 right now. So you talked about your wife wanting to do it again. We have come to the agreement that we are taking a break for a while before we.
Young ones like that. That's a lot of work.
That is.
Yeah.
That's a lot of work, especially with 3. I mean,
yeah. Speaking of break, though, Mark the Cop, are we thinking that
Yes.
maybe at this point we're going to go ahead and take a break?
I think this is a good time to go relieve the bladder.
I think so.
And let's wrap this up. So on the side of the shield within,
Ooh.
Donnie, key the music, and for spinning our gears. Go ahead there, Turk.
Hey, just go ahead
Send
and
this out.
reach out to us on our website, www.spinningourgears.com. We're on a whole plethora of social medias. I'm not going to echo those out right now, but
Well, yeah. God damn it. Go listen to the podcast. Like, share.
I'm not going to list off all the social
Share it
medias.
like Syphilis at a strip club. Come on.
You can find those in previous episodes. You know where we're at.
Is
I
that where
will
the
say-
$5 come in at?
Yes, like, share. Go to their Facebook, Spinning
Yes,
Our Gears,
yes.
and give your. By the way, I hate to date, but I did absolutely love your year-end wrap-up.
Well,
That
thank
was a
you.
that was a
did.
great episode.
Yes, it was.
I listened to every minute of it. I know that I gave you a little shout out there, gave you some love on social media.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, give Spinning Our Gears podcast. I mean, give them a like, give them a share, and
Hmm.
the biggest thing is help. It really helps us in the podcast world
Yes.
on the business end. Those likes, those shares. You don't think it is, and mostly subscribe.
Yes.
And that's most importantly subscribe. So sorry, I didn't mean to hijack
No,
you there,
not at all.
Turk, but go ahead.
Getting the message out and getting into that algorithm, which is a dirty,
Yes.
dirty word. It takes all of those things. So, please
You're
do
a very
this.
talented
Yes,
podcaster,
yes,
bro. It's a pleasure for me to sit here again, sharing a microphone, sharing a studio with you. We've done some work together before. I can't think of better people to partner with.
Right.
And
Yes.
we enjoy our time with you. So thank you very
thank
much for having us on.
Absolutely. Stay safe. We'll get through this together.